The great council hall buzzed with voices from dozens of different worlds. Ambassador Kate Morrison stood behind the human delegation desk and watched the alien representatives argue about matters that would change everything she had served as Earth's voice in this place for 15 years and had seen many debates, but today felt different. Today felt final. Admiral Jake Collins sat beside her and read through reports on his tablet. His face showed no emotion, but Kate could see the tension in his shoulders. The reports were not good. 3 more human colonies had been told they could not expand. 2 human research stations had been ordered to share all their discoveries with the Council. 5 human merchant ships had been searched without cause just last week. Dr. Lisa Grant watched from the visitor seats. She was Earth's top scientist and had come to see what the Council would decide about her life's work. For 10 years, she had developed new technology that helped the whole galaxy. Her quantum drives made space travel faster and safer. Her medical tools had saved millions of lives on dozens of worlds. Her farming methods fed hungry populations across known space. Now the Council wanted to take it all away from humanity and give it to everyone else for free. Captain Ryan Blake was far from the Council chambers, exploring deep space with his crew aboard the UES Horizon. He did not know that in a few hours, his life would change forever. His team of 37 humans represented the best explorers in the galaxy. They had found new worlds, mapped dangerous areas of space, and built the navigation beacons that kept everyone safe. Ryan loved his work and believed that exploration made the galaxy better for all species. Council Speaker Vexthai called for order with his forearms raised high. The Zephyrian was tall and proud, with silver skin that gleamed under the chamber. Lights. He had never liked humans and made no secret of it. To him, humans were young and dangerous. They moved too fast, asked too many questions, and did not respect the old ways. Today he would put them in their proper place. The Council will now vote on Resolution 847, Vexthai announced. His voice carried clearly through the chambers. Translation systems. Humanity will be limited to their current 17 worlds. No new colonies will be permitted. All human military vessels must request permission before leaving their designated space. All human technology developments must be shared freely with Council members, while other species maintain their own property rights. Kate Morrison felt her heart sink. She had fought against this resolution for months, but the votes were already decided. Too many species feared human progress. They saw Earth's people as a threat to the balance of power. Some Council members spoke of human arrogance, but Kate knew the truth. Humans were simply good at solving problems, and that made others jealous. The vote was swift and brutal. 43 species voted yes, only 7 voted no, 3 abstained. The humans had been effectively caged. Dr. Grant stood up in the visitor section. "This is wrong," she said quietly, but her words carried in the sudden silence. "We have helped everyone here. We have shared our knowledge freely. We have asked for nothing but the right to explore and grow like any other species." Vexthai looked down at her with cold eyes. "Humanity has received many benefits from Council membership. It is time you contributed properly to galactic civilization." Admiral Collins slowly stood beside Kate. His uniform was simple but neat, bearing the insignia of Earth's small but capable fleet. "We have contributed," he said calmly. "We have built the emergency stations that save lives in deep space. We maintain the communication networks that let you all talk to each other. We developed the medical technology in your hospitals and the energy systems that power your cities. What more do you want from us?" "We want cooperation, not domination," replied the Altarian representative. Her blue skin shifted color with emotion. "Humans always push forward, always demand more. You do not respect the natural order." Kate Morrison looked around the chamber at faces both familiar and strange. Some showed sympathy, but most showed satisfaction. The decision was made and could not be changed. She took a deep breath and did something that surprised everyone in the room. She smiled. "Very well," Kate said clearly. "The human delegation accepts all Council decisions. We will comply fully with Resolution 847. We will limit our activities." to our designated space. We will share our technology as directed. We will request permission for all military movements. The ease of human acceptance troubled some council members. They had expected anger, protests, or threats. Instead, the human ambassador simply nodded and gathered her papers. Vexthai felt a moment of unease but pushed it aside. Excellent. The council is pleased that humanity sees reason. Captain Blake received the emergency transmission while studying strange energy readings near a dead star. The message was short and came directly from Earth Command. All exploration missions terminated. Immediately, return to human space at once, no exceptions. Blake stared at the message for a long moment. His crew gathered around him, reading over his shoulder. They had been 3 months into a year-long mission to map the Outer Rim territories. Now they were being called home like children who had stayed out too late. "Sir?" asked his first officer. A young woman named Amy Chun. "What do we do?" Blake made the hardest decision of his career. "We follow orders. Plot a course for home." As the U.S. horizon turned away from the unknown and headed back toward human space, Blake wondered what had happened in the council chambers. He would find out soon enough that humanity had just been given an ultimatum, but he would also discover something else. Something the council had not expected. Humans did not react to betrayal with anger or violence. They reacted with something far more dangerous. They reacted with quiet dignity and careful planning. The council thought they had one, but they had actually just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. They had forgotten that the foundation of their civilization rested on human shoulders, and humans could choose to walk away. 3 months had passed since the council vote, and something strange was happening across the galaxy. The human protests that everyone expected never came. The angry messages that should have flooded council communication networks were nowhere to be found. Instead, there was only silence, and that silence was beginning to worry people. Commander Ben Rogers stood in the main office of the human embassy on Nexus Prime. The building that once buzzed with activity now felt empty and cold. Half the staff had already returned to Earth, and more left every week. When alien diplomats asked why, Ben gave the same polite answer. "We are reducing our footprint as the council requested." The embassy's research wing had been completely shut down. The trade office processed only existing contracts and accepted no new ones. The cultural exchange programs that had brought human art and music to dozens of worlds were quietly canceled. The embassy library, which had been a popular gathering place for scholars from many species, was now closed to visitors. Back on Earth, President Maria Santos sat in her office overlooking the Pacific Ocean. The view was beautiful, but her mind was focused on the hardest decision any human leader had ever made. The vote had been unanimous across all 17 human worlds. If the galaxy did not want them as equal partners, then humanity would leave with dignity intact. Dr. Lisa Grant supervised teams of human scientists as they carefully packed up research facilities throughout council space. Every prototype, every database, every breakthrough that had taken decades to develop was being removed. The aliens who worked alongside humans in these facilities seemed confused by the sudden activity. "Where are you taking the quantum resonance equipment?" asked Dr. Yolandra, a Centauri researcher who had collaborated with Grant for 5 years. "Back to human space," Grant replied simply. "The Council has decided that human technology should be shared freely. We prefer to share it from our own facilities." What Dr. Yolandra did not understand was that the quantum resonance equipment was not just being moved. It was being completely dismantled and its key components destroyed. The technology would remain in human hands only. Captain Ryan Blake and his crew worked methodically through deep space, visiting sites that most aliens had forgotten about. Over 2 centuries of galactic presence, humans had built emergency stations, communication relays, and navigation beacons throughout known space. Now they were taking them all back. The work was careful and thorough. Each station was powered down, disassembled, and loaded onto human transport ships. The emergency medical supplies that had saved countless lives were removed. The communication equipment that allowed instant messages across the galaxy was carefully packed away. The navigation beacons that made deep space travel safe were simply turned off and taken. "Captain," said his first officer Amy Chun as they finished clearing the emergency station in the Vega system. "The Altarian patrol ship is asking why we're removing the medical supplies. They say there are no other emergency facilities for 3 light years." Blake looked at the Altarian ship on his screen. It was small and old, the kind that often needed emergency assistance in deep space. "Tell them we are following council orders by limiting our activities to designated human space. The emergency station is outside our designated area." On the trade world of Kepler Station, human merchant Captain Alex Turner completed his final business deals. He had been trading with aliens for 20 years and had friends among many species. Today he was saying goodbye to all of them. Station Master Zikalon barely looked up from his computer when Turner stopped by the office. "Leaving early today, Alex?" "Leaving permanently," Turner replied. "My company is pulling out of non-human space." Now Zikalon looked up, his 4 eyes showing surprise. "Permanently? But your cargo runs are essential for our trade routes. You handle 40% of our deep space shipping." Turner shrugged. "I'm sure other companies will fill the gap. The Council has made it clear that human involvement in galactic commerce should be limited." What Zikalon did not know was that Turner's company was not unique. Every human trading operation was quietly withdrawing from alien space. The cargo ships that had reliably carried goods between distant worlds for generations were heading home and not coming back. Admiral Jake Collins issued his final report to the Council Military Command. All human vessels were withdrawing to their designated space as ordered. What he did not mention was that designated space was being redefined to include only the immediate area around human worlds. The patrol routes that human ships had maintained for decades were being abandoned. The joint training exercises with alien militaries were canceled. The shared defense agreements that had protected smaller species were quietly terminated. The galaxy was vast, and most species only noticed what happened in their immediate area. The disappearance of human infrastructure was gradual and easy to ignore. When a communication relay went dark, people assumed it would be repaired soon. When an emergency station went offline, they figured it was temporary maintenance. When shipping schedules became unreliable, they blamed normal commercial fluctuations. But some people were starting to notice patterns. Council engineer Thalmos of the Andromedan Collective stared at reports from across his territory. Power grid failures were becoming more common. Atmospheric processors on 3 different worlds were showing efficiency problems. The quantum stabilizers that kept their faster-than-light communication working were requiring more maintenance than usual. "Have you contacted the human technical support teams?" asked his assistant. Thalmos shook his head. "They said their support contracts were being terminated as part of the Council's new policies. They referred us to Zephyrian Technical Services instead." The problem was that Zephyrian Technical Services did not understand human technology. Neither did Altarian engineers or Centauri specialists. The quantum mechanics that made modern galactic civilization possible had been developed by humans, and were still primarily understood by humans. But the humans were going home, and they were taking their knowledge with them. Dr. Grant received her first desperate message from an alien colleague 6 weeks after the withdrawal began. Dr. Vexmari of the Regelian Medical Corps was facing a plague outbreak on his homeworld. The treatment required human-developed biotechnology that his people could not operate without technical support. "Please, Dr. Grant," the message said. "Thousands of people will die without your help. Surely scientific cooperation transcends political disagreements." Grant stared at the message for a long time before composing her reply. "I sympathize with your situation, Dr. Vexmari. However, the Council has determined that human involvement in galactic affairs should be limited to our designated space. I suggest you contact the Zephyrian Medical Authority for assistance." She did not mention that Zephyrian medicine was centuries behind human developments. She did not explain that the plague could be stopped in days with proper human intervention. She simply followed the Council's directive to limit human activities. Similar messages were arriving daily now. Requests for technical assistance, please. For emergency aid, offers of payment for human expertise. All received the same polite response. Humanity was complying with Council directives by limiting their involvement to their own space. President Santos received a priority communication from Council Speaker Vexthai. The message was formal but carried undertones of concern. The Council requests clarification of human withdrawal activities. Some member species report difficulty accessing human technical services. Santos composed her reply carefully. Humanity is fully complying with Resolution 847. We have limited our activities to designated space as ordered. We are sharing our technology freely as directed, though we prefer to do so from our own facilities. All human actions are in complete accordance with Council law. What she did not say was that Resolution 847 had been written by people who did not understand what they were destroying. The Council had focused on limiting human expansion and controlling human innovation. They had not considered what would happen if humans simply stopped participating in galactic civilization altogether. The withdrawal continued in silence. Systematic and thorough. Humans packed their laboratories, closed their embassies, recalled their ships, and went home. They did not complain or threaten or demand changes. They simply followed orders with the quiet efficiency that had always marked their best qualities. And across the galaxy, the foundation of civilization began to crack. 6 months after the human withdrawal began, the cracks in galactic civilization had become impossible to ignore. What started as minor inconveniences had grown into serious problems, and those problems were spreading faster than anyone had expected. Captain Zarkith of the Altarian merchant vessel Blue Star found himself stranded in empty space between the Rigel and Vega systems. His navigation computer had failed 3 days ago, and without the emergency beacons that had always marked safe routes through this region, he was completely lost. The stars all looked the same, and his crew was beginning to panic. "Send another distress signal," he ordered his communications officer. "Someone must be monitoring this area." The officer shook his head sadly. "Captain, we have been broadcasting for 18 hours. No response. I think we are alone out here." What Captain Zarkith did not know was that this region of space had been protected by a network of human-maintained emergency stations. Ships in trouble could always count on finding help within a few hours of flight time, but those stations were gone now, dismantled and removed by human crews months earlier. The space lanes that had been safe for generations had become a deadly maze. Overnight. Council engineer Thalmos stared at his reports and felt a growing sense of dread. Systems were failing across Andromedan space, and he was powerless to stop it. The quantum resonance stabilizers that powered their cities were shutting down one by one. The atmospheric processors that made their colony worlds livable were breaking down faster than they could be repaired. Most frightening of all, the medical equipment in their hospitals was becoming unreliable just when they needed it most. "Have the Zephyrian technical teams arrived yet?" he asked his assistant. "Yes, sir, but they are having difficulties. They say the human-designed systems use principles they do not understand. They have requested the original technical manuals." Thalmos rubbed his forehead with 2 of his 4 hands. "The manuals are written in human scientific notation. None of our people can read them properly." It was a problem repeated across the galaxy. Human technology was everywhere, woven into the fabric of galactic civilization so thoroughly that most people had forgotten it was human-made. The power systems, communication networks, medical devices, and transportation infrastructure all bore the mark of human innovation. But humans had developed their own scientific language and mathematical systems that other species had never bothered to learn. Dr. Yolandra stood in her laboratory and stared at equipment worth millions of credits that might as well have been expensive sculptures. Every piece of advanced technology in the room relied on human quantum processing techniques that she could not understand or replicate. Her attempts to reverse engineer the systems had failed catastrophically, destroying samples that represented years of work. "Dr. Grant always made it look so easy," she muttered to herself. She would adjust a few settings and solve problems that had puzzled us for months. But Dr. Grant was gone, along with every other human scientist who had once collaborated freely with alien researchers. The Council had demanded that humans share their technology, but they had not considered that sharing technology required teachers who understood it. Without human expertise, the most advanced alien civilizations were suddenly working with tools they could not properly use. Captain Sam Mitchell of the cargo vessel UES Liberty was among the last humans still operating in Council space. He had volunteered to handle final evacuation duties, making sure all human personnel and equipment were safely removed from alien territory. As he prepared to leave the Vega system for the last time, he transmitted a simple message to the orbital. Control Tower, UES Liberty departing Vega space. Safe travels to all. The Altarian controllers did not realize they were hearing humanity's final farewell to a region of space that had been human-protected for over a century. They also did not know that when Mitchell's ship disappeared into faster-than-light travel, they would be truly alone for the first time in their species' history. The disappearance of human rescue services was becoming a crisis. 3 ships had gone missing in the Kepler void during the past month, and no one knew where they were or how to find them. The search and rescue protocols had always been handled by human crews with specialized equipment and decades of experience. Without them, lost ships simply stayed lost. President Maria Santos read intelligence reports from across the galaxy with mixed feelings. The suffering was real and growing worse every day, but humanity had not chosen this path. They had offered partnership and been rejected. They had contributed freely and been taken for granted. Now the galaxy was learning what life was like without human help. "Ma'am," said her chief of staff, "we are receiving increasing numbers of emergency requests from Council species. Medical crises, infrastructure failures, ships in distress." "Should we respond?" Santos shook her head firmly. "We are complying with Council directives. Human assistance is limited to designated space only. We cannot violate Council law." It was a decision that weighed heavily on her conscience, but it was also necessary. The galaxy needed to understand what it had lost before it could appreciate what it might regain. Council Speaker Vexthai called an emergency session after receiving crisis reports from over 20 member species. The great chamber that had once buzzed with confident debate now felt tense and worried. Representatives spoke of system failures, communication breakdowns, and supply chain collapses that were affecting billions of people. The Andromedan Collective has lost 3 colony worlds to environmental collapse, reported their delegate. Our atmospheric processes have failed, and we do not know how to repair them. The Altarian Federation is experiencing massive shipping delays, added another voice. Our traditional trade routes have become too dangerous without proper navigation support. 17 different species have reported medical emergencies that their own doctors cannot handle, said a third representative. The biotechnology they depend on requires human technical expertise to operate. Vexthai listened to the growing list of crises with increasing alarm. When he had pushed through Resolution 847, he had expected human protests and political maneuvering. He had not expected humans to simply vanish from galactic civilization, taking their knowledge and infrastructure with them. "Have we attempted to contact human authorities?" he asked. "Yes, sir," replied the Council's chief diplomat. "All requests for assistance receive the same response. Humans are complying with Council directives by limiting their activities to designated space. They suggest we contact other species for technical support." The problem was that no other species possessed the knowledge needed to maintain human-designed systems. Centuries of human innovation had created technology so advanced that it might as well have been magic to many alien civilizations. They could use it when it worked, but they could not repair it when it broke. Lieutenant Rachel Price monitored communications from her post on the human frontier world of New Eden. The messages from Council space told a story of escalating desperation, offers of massive payments for human technical assistance, promises of political concessions if humans would resume their support roles. Pleas for emergency aid that became more desperate each day. "Lieutenant," said her commanding officer, "the Council is offering full restoration of human rights plus territorial expansion in exchange for immediate technical assistance. Should I forward this to Earth?" Price read the message carefully. It was signed by Speaker Vexthai himself and represented complete capitulation on every issue that had led to the crisis. 6 months ago, such an offer would have been everything humanity wanted. Now it felt too little and too late. "Forward it through proper channels," she said. "But I doubt it will change anything. The Council made their choice. Now they have to live with the consequences." Back on Earth, Dr. Grant worked in her new laboratory and tried not to think about the suffering her absence was causing. She had dedicated her life to helping others, and walking away from that mission went against every instinct she possessed. But the galaxy had made it clear that human help was unwanted. Perhaps when the crisis passed, people would remember the value of cooperation over domination. The final human transport ship left Council space on a Tuesday morning, carrying the last group of human civilians who had chosen to return home rather than live under Council restrictions. Captain Blake watched the ship disappear into faster-than-light travel and felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. The withdrawal was complete. Humanity had honored its obligations and removed itself from galactic affairs as ordered. Now they would wait and see what the galaxy did without them. The answer was becoming clearer every day, and it was not pretty. Systems were failing, people were dying, and entire civilizations were discovering that they had built their prosperity on a foundation they did not understand and could not maintain. The humans had departed in silence, and their absence was speaking louder than any words ever could. 1 year after humanity's departure, the Galactic Council faced a catastrophe beyond anything in recorded history. What had begun as infrastructure problems had cascaded into complete civilizational breakdown across dozens of star systems. The carefully maintained balance that had kept galactic society functioning for centuries was collapsing, and the people who could fix it were no longer answering calls for help. Admiral Kethver of the Rigelian Defense Force stood on the bridge of his flagship and stared at reports that made his blood run cold. Half of his fleet was grounded due to mechanical failures that his engineers could not repair. The fusion cores that powered their massive warships were shutting down one by one, and without human technical support, they might as well have been flying chunks of metal. "Admiral," said his chief engineer, "we have identified the problem with the power systems. The quantum resonance chambers require recalibration using human mathematical protocols. Our computers cannot process the equations properly." Kethver felt a surge of anger and frustration. "Are you telling me that the most powerful military in the galaxy is helpless because we cannot do human mathematics?" "I'm afraid so, sir. The humans designed these systems using principles that our species never fully understood. We learned to operate the technology, but we never learned to maintain it." The same scene was playing out across the galaxy. Military fleets that had once projected power across star systems were becoming space junk. Defense networks that had protected billions of people were going dark. The weapons technology that had maintained peace through strength was failing just when tensions between species were rising due to the ongoing crisis. Dr. Yolandra stumbled through her laboratory like a ghost, surrounded by equipment that no longer worked and experiments that could never be completed. 3 months ago, she had been one of the galaxy's most respected scientists, winner of numerous awards for her research into quantum biology. Now she could barely operate the basic tools of her trade. "The protein synthesizer is completely dead," she told her assistant. "The quantum microscope shows only static. The genetic sequencer produces random data. Everything requires human calibration, procedures that our manuals do not explain properly." Her assistant looked around the lab with despair. "What do we do?" "Our research program represents the work of hundreds of scientists over decades." Yolandra had no answer. Without human-designed and maintained equipment, her field of study had effectively ceased to exist. Worse, the medical applications of her research had been keeping thousands of people alive across Centauri space. As the equipment failed, those people were beginning to die. Planet after planet reported the same devastating pattern. Agricultural systems that fed billions were producing smaller harvests as human-designed soil processors lost efficiency. Water purification plants that served entire cities were breaking down as their quantum filtration systems went offline. Even basic transportation was becoming unreliable as the navigation. Computers in civilian vehicles lost connection to the human-built satellite networks. Council Speaker Vexthai had not slept properly in weeks. His office was flooded with crisis reports that arrived faster than his staff could process them. The Kepler void had claimed 37 ships in the past 2 months. The terraforming operations on 61 worlds were failing as atmospheric processors shut down. Medical plagues that had been eliminated for generations were returning as human-developed treatments became unavailable. "Sir," said his chief of staff, "the Andromedan Collective is threatening to withdraw from the Council unless we resolve the human situation immediately. They have lost 7 colony worlds to environmental collapse in the past month." Vexthai stared at a holographic display showing the spread of system failures across Council space. Red indicators marked dead worlds, failed colonies, and regions where galactic civilization had effectively ended. The map looked like a disease spreading through the body of known space. "What about the emergency sessions with member species?" he asked. "Postponed indefinitely, sir. Most delegates cannot travel safely due to navigation system failures. The communication networks are too unreliable for remote participation." It was an irony that would have been funny under other circumstances. The council that had sought to limit human activities could no longer meet because human-maintained infrastructure was no longer available to support their meetings. Captain Elena Rodriguez received a message unlike any in human history while patrolling the border of human space. The transmission came directly from Speaker Vexthai and represented complete surrender on every issue that had caused the crisis. "The Galactic Council hereby offers humanity full leadership of galactic civilization," the message read. "Humans will receive unlimited territorial expansion rights, complete technological autonomy, and supreme authority over all Council decisions. In return, we ask only that you resume technical support operations and help us restore basic infrastructure. Billions of innocent people are suffering through no fault of their own." Rodriguez stared at the message for a long time before forwarding it to Earth Command. The offer was everything humanity had ever wanted and more, but she wondered if it was too late. The galaxy was dying, and with each passing day, more people paid the price for their leader's arrogance. Admiral Jake Collins brought the message to President Santos along with intelligence reports that painted a grim picture of galactic civilization. "Ma'am, our long-range sensors show massive refugee movements throughout Council space. Entire populations are abandoning failed colonies and trying to reach more stable worlds. The problem is that there are no stable worlds left. The failure is systemic." Santos read through the reports with growing horror. The Altarian Federation was seeing mass starvation as their agricultural technology failed. The Zephyrian Republic had lost contact with half their star systems due to communication network collapse. The Andromedan Collective was facing complete governmental breakdown as their administrative computers crashed without human-coded software. "How many people are we talking about?" she asked quietly. "Conservative estimates suggest over 200 billion beings are at immediate risk," Collins replied. "If the collapse continues at current rates, we could see the complete end of galactic civilization within 6 months." The weight of that number settled on Santos like a physical burden. 200 billion lives hanging in the balance because the galaxy had decided that human contributions were not valuable enough to justify equal treatment. The irony was bitter, but the suffering was real. Dr. Lisa Grant led the first emergency planning session humanity had held since the withdrawal began. The room was filled with Earth's best scientists, engineers, and technical specialists, all grappling with the moral implications of their absence from galactic affairs. "The medical situation is the most urgent," reported Dr. Kevin Walsh, formerly the head of Galactic Health Services. Without human-maintained biotechnology, 17 different plagues are spreading unchecked. We could be looking at casualties in the tens of billions. Infrastructure collapse is accelerating, added Chief Engineer Nancy Kim. Power grids are failing faster than they can be repaired. Communication networks are fragmenting. Transportation systems are shutting down. Some regions of space have effectively returned to pre-industrial conditions. Grant listened to the reports and felt the weight of responsibility that came with being needed by others. What would it take to restore basic services? She asked. Massive intervention, Kim replied. We would need to deploy thousands of technical teams across hundreds of star systems. It would require the complete mobilization of human resources on a scale never before attempted. The room fell silent as everyone contemplated the magnitude of the task. Saving galactic civilization would require humanity to commit everything they had to helping the people who had driven them away. It would be the greatest act of forgiveness in recorded history. Commander Ben Rogers returned to Nexus Prime, aboard the first human ship to enter Council space in 6 months. The journey that had once taken hours now required days due to the failure of navigation networks. When he finally reached the Council homeworld, what he found shocked him to his core. The planet that had once been the shining center of galactic civilization was dying. Half the city was dark due to power failures. The spaceport was nearly empty, because most ships could no longer navigate safely to reach it. The Great Council building itself was operating on emergency power and looked like a shadow of its former glory. Rogers carried a message from President Santos that would determine the fate of billions. As he walked through corridors that had once bustled with alien diplomats and now felt like a tomb, he wondered if humanity was about to make the biggest decision in their species' history. The choice was simple but profound. They could let the galaxy collapse and preserve their own dignity, or they could return to help and risk being taken for granted once again. Either way, the universe would never be the same. The cost of everything was finally being counted, and the bill was higher than anyone had imagined. 2 years after humanity's silent departure, the Galactic Council met for what everyone knew would be the last time. The great chamber that had once housed representatives from hundreds of worlds now held fewer than 30 delegates. The rest were either dead, unreachable due to communication failures, or dealing with crises too severe to leave their homeworlds. Council. Speaker Vexthai looked like he had aged decades in the past months. His silver skin had dulled to gray, and his forearms shook as he called the session to order. The life support systems in the chamber were failing, maintained only by emergency repairs that bought them days rather than months. Outside the windows, the once great city of Nexus Prime lay mostly dark and silent. The Council recognizes the gravity of our situation, Vexthai began, his voice barely carrying through the damaged translation systems. Galactic civilization as we have known it for over 1,000 years is ending. We have one final option to consider. Commander Ben. Rogers stood in the observer section, wearing a human diplomatic uniform that looked strangely out of place in the dying chamber. He carried the final message from President Santos, a document that would either save billions of lives or consign them to darkness. The choice was no longer humanity's to make. Captain Elena Rodriguez of the exploration vessel UES Pathfinder received the transmission while monitoring the edge of human space. The message was simple but carried the weight of history. All human vessels are authorized to respond to emergency situations involving immediate loss of life. Humanitarian protocols are now in effect. It was the first crack in humanity's isolation, a recognition that some things mattered more than politics or pride. Rodriguez looked at her crew and saw the relief in their faces. They had joined the space service to help people, and for 2 years they had been forced to ignore distress calls from beings who were suffering through no fault of their own. Set course for the Vega system, Rodriguez ordered. We have work to do. Dr. Lisa Grant led the first human relief mission to leave Earth in over 2 years. Her team of medical specialists and engineers represented the beginning of what would become the largest humanitarian operation in galactic history. As their ship approached the dying world of Centauri Prime, Grant felt the weight of responsibility that came with being needed by others. The planet below was a nightmare of system failures and social collapse. Power grids had failed across entire continents. Water treatment plants had shut down, leaving billions without clean water. The medical infrastructure that had once made Centauri Prime a model for galactic healthcare was completely non-functional. "Dr. Grant," said her chief medical officer, "the Planetary Health Authority estimates over 50 million casualties from preventable diseases in the past 6 months alone." "The hospital equipment is completely offline," Grant nodded grimly. "Begin emergency repairs on the medical systems. Priority goes to infectious disease treatment and basic life support. We will worry about advanced procedures later." The work was systematic and thorough, but it came with conditions that would reshape galactic civilization. Human engineers restored failing power grids, but they installed new control systems that required human operators. Human doctors treated epidemic diseases, but they established medical protocols that put human experts in charge of planetary health systems. Human technicians reopened communication networks, but they built them using standards that only humanity fully understood. Admiral Jake Collins coordinated the relief effort from Earth with mixed feelings. They were saving lives and preventing suffering on an unimaginable scale, but they were also fundamentally changing the balance of power in the galaxy. "Ma'am," he reported to President Santos, "our teams are making excellent progress, but the recipient species are becoming completely dependent on our support. Without human supervision, these systems will fail again within months." Santos nodded sadly. "That is the price they pay for 2 centuries of taking our contributions for granted. We offered partnership, and they chose domination. Now they must accept guidance." Captain Ryan Blake returned to the Kepler void with new navigation beacons and a heavy heart. The region that had once been safe for travel had become a graveyard of ships whose crews had died lost and alone in empty space. His job was to make the shipping lanes safe again, but he could not bring back the people who had already paid the ultimate price for galactic arrogance. "Captain," said his first officer, Amy Chun, "we are receiving distress signals from 3 different vessels. All are reporting critical system failures and requesting immediate assistance." Blake looked at the tactical display showing ships scattered across the void like broken toys. "Begin search and rescue operations. Everyone we can save, we save." The rescue work was dangerous and exhausting, but it demonstrated something important about human nature. Despite everything that had happened, despite the contempt and restrictions they had endured, humans still risked their lives to help others. It was a lesson that some alien species were finally beginning to understand. Commander Rogers delivered President Santos's final message to the remaining council members in a ceremony that felt more like a funeral than a political meeting. "The United Nations of Earth hereby dissolves the Galactic Council," he read. "In its place, humanity establishes the Terran Federation, with voluntary membership open to any species that chooses cooperation over domination." The terms were simple but revolutionary. Member species would have representation based on their contributions to galactic welfare rather than their military power. Technology would be shared freely among all members, but the sharing would be supervised by those who understood it best. Most importantly, no species would be permitted to restrict the activities of others without clear justification and majority consent. Vexthai listened to the terms with something approaching relief. The council he had led for over a decade was ending, but something better might take its place. "What about those species that choose not to join?" he asked. Rogers's answer was polite but firm. "They will be welcome to manage their own affairs without Federation assistance. Humanity will not force cooperation on anyone, but neither will we provide support to those who reject partnership." Dr. Grant supervised the restoration of the medical facility on Nexus Prime and reflected on how much had changed. 2 years ago, she had been an equal partner in galactic scientific research. Now she was effectively the head of galactic medicine, with alien doctors looking to her for guidance on every major decision. The power was gratifying but also sobering. "Dr. Grant," said Dr. Ylandra, who had become her chief assistant, The Andromedan Medical Authority is requesting permission to establish new research protocols. Should I approve them? Grant reviewed the request carefully. The Andromedans wanted to restart their biological weapons research program, something that had been banned under Council law but might now be permissible under Federation rules. Denied, she said firmly. Medical research is for healing, not killing. If they want to develop weapons, they can do it without Federation support. It was a decision that would have been impossible under the old system, where humans were junior partners with limited authority. Now, with alien civilizations dependent on human expertise for survival, humanity could enforce standards that reflected their values rather than political compromises. Captain Sam Mitchell completed the installation of the final communication relay in the restored network and transmitted a simple message to all Federation worlds. Welcome back to the conversation. The words carried across space to billions of people who had spent months cut off from the larger galaxy, wondering if they were alone in the universe. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Messages of gratitude, requests for assistance, and applications for Federation membership flooded the communication networks. Species that had once looked down on humanity as young and inexperienced were now begging for the chance to be junior partners in a human-led alliance. President Santos read through the applications with careful attention to the lessons of history. The Zephyrian Republic requested full membership and offered to share their remaining technology freely. The Altarian Federation promised to provide raw materials for Federation construction projects. The Andromedan Collective asked only for basic life support assistance and expressed willingness to accept any terms humanity considered appropriate. It is ironic, Santos told her cabinet during their weekly meeting. They demanded that we share our technology freely while keeping their own secrets. Now they are offering us everything they have in exchange for basic survival. The rebuilding process took 5 years and required the complete mobilization of human resources. Every human world contributed ships, personnel, and technology to the effort. Engineers rebuilt power grids across hundreds of planets. Doctors established medical systems that could function independently. Teachers created educational programs that would prevent future technological dependence. But the most important change was cultural rather than technical. The species that joined the Federation learned to value cooperation over competition, contribution over consumption. They discovered that true strength came from building others up rather than tearing them down. Most importantly, they learned to appreciate the quiet competence of those who kept civilization running.